your sight. You are our rock and our redeemer. What a night. And if you look in your bulletin, the picture I chose shows the fury of the wind, which is about to blow out that torch that they're holding. It's battering the wagon, it's battering the walkers. And I chose this picture because of the lightning and the wind. And you know, if there's lightning, there's also thunder. That's that sound of the wind. And this picture shows the strength of the storm. Even Moses' beard and hair are being whipped about by the wind. And he's having to exert strength to hold his hand stretched out as God commanded it. Now, walking through water on dry land sounds a little bit tame. But this was a wild night. A night when faith and fear were holding a battle in the hearts of the men, the women, and the children. Now, of course, we're on the other side of the story, so we can look back and know that this was the night of the Israelites' salvation. And in fact, throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament, we are asked, reminded, look what Moses did. Remember how God led the people out of Egypt with a mighty hand. So when they pointed back to remember that night, what were they pointing to? Well, they were pointing at the comparison of the strength of armies. If Israel had an army, and it says there was an Israelite army, it would have been a makeshift, grab what you have, and maybe your garden hose, it would have been a makeshift, but whereas the Egyptian army, fast horses, strong chariots, and trained military, it was unequal, and it would have taken God to tip the scales in favor of the Israelites. God was their rear guard, and they would have pointed back and said, the pillar of the crowd moved behind us. So all night long, even though we knew that the Egyptian army was there, they did not come near us. Because if the Egyptians had overtaken the Israelites before they reached the sea, the Israelites would have been dragged back into slavery. They would have pointed back to that waiting in the wind, how they felt on that fearful, fateful night as the wind roared around them, of the uncertainty and the dread. And they would have then pointed back to the amazement of the dry ground, where there had not been a path at all. Suddenly there was a path. They would have pointed back and said what courage it took to enter in. If you have any kind of claustrophobia or fear of water or drowning, to enter in between those two walls. We went to an aquarium in Nebraska, and you could walk under this arc of water, and you could see the fish. But at one point we were walking, and I thought, what if this breaks? We're going to be flooded if it breaks. And they did not even have visible plexiglass. They just had the powerful hand of God holding back the water and the obedient hand of Moses. They would have pointed back that it was a night of obedience to God, which is also a trust in his means and methods. Now maybe whoever was in the Israelite army, when they saw the Egyptians thrown into a panic and their chariots getting mired down, they might have thought, we can drive them out. But God didn't tell them to. What would have happened if they turned around and fought? In the morning when the sea rushed back, they would have been under the waters. So they did it God's way. Even at the end of the story, we are told that they feared and believed in the Lord and in his servant, Moses. For a great of a leader that Moses was and would prove to be, he was God's servant, and he never stepped over that bound, because his power only came through his obedience to God. And they would have pointed back to that night as a celebration, like we read in our call to worship. Freedom was finally theirs. They acknowledged the great work the Lord had done, and it gave them more confidence that he was going to continue to lead them, and that he would bring them to the sanctuary, to the promised land. They sang songs, and they said, the Lord has triumphed gloriously. And all throughout Scripture, we are told to remember and honor what God has done. We are still told to praise him for his amazing acts and the triumphs he has given us in life, even triumphs that come through times of great testing. And I believe the greatest triumphs do come through times of great testing. This past week was one to look back on a frightening and difficult passage in our history as we remember the events of 9/11. As I was looking back on that and thinking, what do we point back to remember? I came across a message from Billy Graham, and he had 3 things he thought we should remember and be reminded of. First, he said, we are reminded of the mystery and reality of evil. I've been asked hundreds of times why God allows tragedy and suffering. I have to confess that I do not know the answer. I have to accept, by faith, that God is sovereign and that He is a God of love, mercy, and compassion in the midst of suffering. Secondly, he said it was a lesson about our need for each other. And he held up examples in New York and Washington of the people, pictures of courageous firefighters and police, or the hundreds of people standing patiently in line to donate blood. We saw that we needed one another and we came together. And additionally, he said, this event can give a message of hope. Hope for the present and hope for the future. Yes, we were attacked, buildings were destroyed, lives lost. But he says we have a choice, whether to implode and disintegrate emotionally and spiritually as a people and a nation, or to choose to become stronger through all of this struggle, to rebuild on a solid foundation. That foundation is our trust in God. And then he quotes from How Firm a Foundation. He says that God assures us, fear not, I am with thee. Oh, be not dismayed, for I am thy God and will give thee aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. And that is the same hand that parted the water. So Billy Graham said, my prayer today is that we will feel the loving arms of God wrapped around us, and that we trust in Him. And as we trust in Him, we will know in our hearts that He will never forsake us. And that is our hope. Joshua B. Webster, a researcher in Christian ethics, also had this comment. In the aftermath of this tragedy, something truly extraordinary happened. On the very day of the attacks, leaders in Washington did something rarely seen. Together in a stunning display of unity, roughly 150 members of Congress gathered on the steps of the U.S. Capitol to help a grieving nation heal. After observing a moment of silence, the assembly began to sing the lyrics of God Bless America. And for that brief moment in time, there were no Democrats or Republicans, congressmen or senators. There were only Americans. Among those memories of fear and loss and pain is also a reminder of hope. And as we as Christians bear the burden of reminding the world that hope has a name, and that name is Jesus. And I think we are still in times that need a reminder of hope, that we can all make it, that we can make it through, that in all things Christ is victorious. In these times of unrest, our hope is in the God who provides, who guides, who walks with us through the deep waters of life and opens a way forward, even if it is only one step at a time. Our way back to God was opened by Jesus, who came to walk on earth with us and who opens the door of heaven for us. So we are asked to remember the times when God has rescued us, when Christ has come through for us, when the Spirit battled on our side. You know, we have all experienced times of grief, of illness, of loss, of fear that have threatened to close in over our heads. But we've also experienced time when God held back the waters, or Jesus held our head above the waters, or the Spirit swam with us in the waters. Those times of remembering are faith builders for us, as they were for the Israelites. We will make it through some rough passages, and we will all make a final passage. God will be with us. And I've shared before about my friend Virginia, who made a rough passage through a battle against pancreatic cancer. She beat some of the odds, living longer than doctors said. She got to see her daughter graduate and get married. She continued for a couple years to serve as the aide at a grade school, always overseeing the book fair. She forged new friendships. She inspired people. She accepted support from people. She laughed and she loved. Her passage was probably attended by more doctor's visits, tests, and procedures and tired days than she would have liked, but it was also attended by beautiful moments of love and appreciation, of truth and sincerity, of courage and faith. And as she lay dying, attended by family and friends, her death was attended by angels singing. She said, "I hear the angels singing." Her story is one I like to remember because it gives me hope and points to our greatest passage, the final passage to the promised land. And it puts me in mind of the song written by Samuel Stennett in 1721. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wistful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. Where do our true possessions lie? You know, we can spend a lot of time moving things around, and we value some things because they're old and historic, or we value some things because they're new, modern, and efficient. We value some things because they're a bargain. But which of these things will we take with us? As the Israelites made their hasty departure, surely there were some things that they had to jettison, that they had to toss off to the side. You know, the older I get, the more I realize that my precious possessions are not things at all. They are love and memories and opportunities to serve. And one memory is especially precious. My mother battled with depression, but she was also very fun-loving. We had gone to visit one time, and it was rainy, and the rain had let up, but it was just pure foggy, and we didn't want to get the kids out in the mud. But my mom tried every day to get a walk, and I said, "I'll go with you." So I threw on a raincoat, and off we went through the pasture, through the fog, which gave it a kind of a unique characteristic. And we walked, and as we got near the creek, because the waters were high, we could hear it just running. And she said, "I wonder how far over there it is." Well, she found some hedge apples, and that year they had grown really big. And she took one, and she bowled it, and we listened and splashed. We couldn't see the creek, but we heard it land. So I took one, and I bowled it, and we listened for the splash. And we did that till we ran out of hedge apples. But my mother, being an old lady, could make you feel young. And we even took 2 hedge apples and put them on the post by the cattle crossing, just so everybody coming in the drive would wonder, who did that? Well, my mother has crossed the creek. But the memories I have of her are my precious possessions here, and the knowledge that I will be with her one day in heaven is my precious possession there. And those possessions will never be taken away from me. You know, the song that Stennett wrote goes on to say, "O'er all those wide extended plains shines one eternal day. There God the Son forever reigns and scatters night away. No chilling winds or poisonous breath can reach that healthful shore. Sickness and sorrow, pain and death are felt and feared no more. When I shall reach that happy place, I'll be forever blessed, for I shall see my Father's face, and in his bosom rest." You know, Jesus has parted the waters of dread and of sin, and he's made a path forward, opening the way to the promised land. So what will be our response? Will we remember his works and believe and walk forward in faith? I like this suggestion from Hebrews 12, verse 1. "Therefore, since we have such a large cloud of witnesses, beginning from the Old Testament and stretching through to our very life, We have a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us. Let us lay aside everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us. Amen.